Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass of WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. And for the first time in the history of the podcast, we don't have a title sponsor. That's the first time in 5 years that's been the case. So we are wide open. Would love your help. If you're interested in helping out with that, email me, please, at chrislee70@gmail.com. Obviously, it takes time and money to pull these off, so we're always looking for help, and if you could offer that, we'd be appreciative. Our news is presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200, see what your rights are and if they can help. Javier Vaz has committed to Vanderbilt baseball. He's a middle infielder from LSU Eunice. He had a .509 on-base percentage in his last full season there. Good one for the Commodores. Maybe a little bit of Tony Kemp to his game there. We'll wait and see about that. Our guest line presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I had no clue how comfortable Boll & Branch sheets were until I got them. They are fair trade certified, meaning they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us, as he does each week, from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. How are you, sir?
Where is that son of a... He owes me money. What up, Chris? Chris Lee in the house. Man, let me tell you, dude, I just got home a little while ago. I had the best oxtail and Jamaican rice and beans with cabbage that you have ever had in your life today, man. I'm still reeling from it.
I think I'll pass.
I think you're nuts. Why would you? You don't think that oxtail is actually ox, do you?
Well, now I guess I know.
Let me tell you something. It is not ox, and it is absolutely fall off the bone delicious, and one of the greatest meals you could possibly eat. Next time that you're in the 731 and you come down here with me, I'm taking you to the Jamaican African cuisine. And it'll change your life, Chris. It's that good. I put a picture of it up on Facebook today on my Facebook page. You guys can check it out. It is otherworldly, Chris. Otherworldly. It's that good. I would never steer you wrong when it comes to food.
That's not my thing. I don't dislike it. I'd give it a try if you insisted that's good. I've had Jamaican before. We've been to Jamaica twice, so I'm not unfamiliar with the cuisine. And we had a cafe up here. Had a couple of them. I want to say it was like the Lucayan Cafe or something. That's not it, but it's something like that. And it was okay, but it wasn't. No, that's not it. I think that was the name of one of the dishes. If you said the name of the place, I would know it. I think there was one in Green Hills and maybe one in Franklin. But, I mean, it was okay, but it just wasn't my thing.
You up when you come to town. My man Joseph is from Jamaica, and life-changing, sir, life-changing. And I expect, by the way, somehow when you go ahead and you when you make the title for this podcast, I expect the word oxtail to be in there somewhere.
All right.
That don't mean it's going to happen, but
your odds are better right now than ever.
Seems fair. He said, if we stop doing the podcast right now, you got a good shot.
Speaking of just another dandy day on the beat here. I was thinking this week, if there's not a football season this fall, and they do all three at once in the spring, that being the three that I cover, football, men's basketball, baseball, you're in my shoes. How do you handle that?
I just hit the unemployment line.
Well, it may come to that, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have to wonder what that's like. I do this. I do it for a living too. I talk sports every night.
Well,
2 hours a week.
yes, but let
2 hours
me
a day.
let me
Excuse me.
stop you there, okay? Because it's a little
Yeah, stop
different when you're
me.
covering a team, and like you know how we cover all three of those beats, right? We're there for most of the games. We're watching the ones, especially football and basketball. If we're not there, we're watching on TV. Other than maybe one of those throwaway games between Christmas and New Year's where I'm on vacation at my in-laws or something, and they're going to win by 40, so who cares, right? And baseball's different because they play maybe 70 games a year, and I can't do all those, but we do most of the big ones and a lot of the ones that aren't big. But think about this from my standpoint, okay? You're going to have games running simultaneously. I mean, I could have a weekend where I have football and basketball on Saturday and baseball on Saturday and also baseball Friday and Sunday. Now, this is being completely speculative, right? I don't have any knowledge of this, and who's to say that they can't change up the game dates a little bit to spread these things out? But I'm just thinking, what am I going to do with all that stuff to cover at once when we try to cover as much of it as we can? Now, the obvious is going to be hiring some freelance help, which I've already thought about doing and even talked to one person about doing. But it's going to be a real challenge.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, I don't know how you're focusing on all of it. I've been thinking about that myself. We're about to go from a period. Think about this for a second, Chris. This is something else that I thought about. We're about to go from a period sports talk because look, and sports coverage and sports talk. Like for me, I've been almost 4 months now doing a 2-hour nightly sports show without sports. And you're about to go from nothing to potentially everything all at once at the exact same time, and it's going to go from where do you go to information overload. I'm very interested to see how all this plays out, man. And as far as you and how you handle that, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's uncertain territory for everybody.
Okay, let me throw this at you, okay? I'm just going to make up a hypothetical. And I want to see how you would handle this. Let's say that
Let's do it.
that the schedule comes out this way. Let's say that there's a weekend where I've got, let's say Vanderbilt's got a baseball series with LSU. And maybe it's the 8th or 9th weekend of the year or 10th, and whoever wins that series is probably going to be SEC champion, right?
So it's a big one. It's a monster series.
Yeah, both teams are in the hunt for a national seed, that kind of thing. You got Kumar Rocker going in one of maybe his last home weekend or something like that, or one of his last home weekends, and Leiter in the same boat. I mean, it's something everybody wants to see, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that you've got basketball going on at the same time at the Saturday game, and it's Kentucky in Memorial Gym. And let's say that somewhere, well, they wouldn't do all this, and let's say you got a football game with like South Carolina in the middle of it. We got to make a choice. I can only cover one of the three. Which do you cover? Because football is the one that everybody's most interested in. But let's say they're 2-8 at that point of the season, and it's how those get late in the year. And let's say they're a little better in basketball than people expect, and Kentucky's always a big game. But then you got something where there's a lot riding on that. Okay, how do you do that if you're me?
If you're you, taking how you feel about anything out of the equation?
Yes.
Am I doing that? Okay. Now let me ask you a question because you didn't really preface this part. What's on the line in the basketball game? How good are both of these teams?
Kentucky is Kentucky, and Vanderbilt is maybe a little sneaky good, and if things break right down the stretch, they might sneak into the NIT.
Okay, so now what we're asking is for board interest. What would be the main focus, and who we play in South Carolina in football?
Yeah, I was just trying to pick a run-of-the-mill football game because football usually trumps everything, but let's say again they're bad and it's just kind of it's not Tennessee or something like that where people are going to watch just because of who it is. And South Carolina is also a game that, like, if they play well, maybe they win that one. So it's not like you play in Georgia and you're going to get beat by 30, right? So I was
Right.
deliberate with my choice of teams there.
Right. I feel like I'm playing like I'll G-rate it up and kiss, marry, kill here is what I feel like I'm playing. Okay, let's see. How am I going to drum up the most attention? What is going to get the most? You know, I still, I don't, man, look, my first inclination, my gut, they always say that your gut reaction and your reaction is usually the correct one. I don't know if that's the case here because my first one is still football.
I think there's a lot of people who think like that. I agree. I think I'm not surprised that you said that.
Well, I mean, and I'm taking how I feel out of it, and I'm taking out how I know that you feel about it out of it, and I'm just going by what I think maybe the board reaction might be. Here's why it's not baseball, because regardless of what happens in that series, Vanderbilt is still going to be probably a regional host. They're a real shot to win the SEC tournament, a very likely super regional team. And who's going to be surprised if they're in Omaha, especially with that rotation? It's certainly going to pique everybody's interest. It's probably easily the biggest college baseball series of that weekend, and maybe the biggest one in the conference, and maybe the biggest one in the country. Who knows? All year long. But there is definitely something coming up after that. From the basketball side of things, who do we want to beat more than anybody? Not named Tennessee. It's clearly Kentucky. No question about it. But the thing about football is I mean, it gives you probably more opportunity as that fan base to belly ache, and man, do we like to do that, and we certainly have a lot of reasons to do that. From a popularity standpoint, maybe not for this university, but from a sport itself. Look, I mean, all three of those series featured matchups with other SEC teams, and this is still the Southeastern Conference, and the king is still football. Can I say that at this school? Maybe, probably not. I'll say this. Here's what I would say to you. If we could magically, if some kind of genie could magically grant us the opportunity as a fan base to be great at one thing in those three sports, I feel comfortable in saying that it would be football. We know what it is to be national champs in baseball. We love it. It's awesome. No question about it. And we've had some really, really good basketball teams. But when have we ever been great in football? I mean, great. I'm not talking about 19-0 this. I'm talking about great to the point where, and not just for 1 or 2 years that we're looking the Georgias in the eye, but to the point where we're the CBS game of the week because God, we're the matchup, man. Can you imagine Saturday, man, Auburn and Vanderbilt? I still submit to you that if you were to be able to maximize each one of those sports to go as far as you possibly could, I just don't think that anything would be able to equal a supremely successful Vanderbilt football program, the kind that's playing for national championships. I just think that's going to trump everything else. I could be wrong. I don't know that for sure, but that's the way I see it.
I kind of heard you saying there, I'm going to take some license with your words. Championships are so been there and done that for baseball that they don't even move the needle for you anymore.
It's not no. It's not that they don't move the needle.
I'm taking some license, but it was funny how you answered that.
Well, it's just, I mean, it's something I've experienced before. I know what it tastes like. It's awesome. It's great. It's wonderful. But if I'm going to be truthful with you, if I could compare it to winning the national championship in football, comparing to winning the national championship in football, you're correct. It wouldn't move the needle. but it certainly does because we have. And I mean, trust me when I tell you, anybody that was around me would tell you I acted a certified monkey. I acted a complete fool. They called me a circus because because I was clowning, baby. I had a large time both times. Don't get that twisted. But think about that, Chris. Think about Vanderbilt in football being better than Alabama and Clemson and LSU and Ohio State and Florida and everybody. And you're the best team in all of America in college football in the place where it matters the most. You can't even allow yourself to go there, can you? Because it's just so far fetched and so removed from reality. But what if it was reality?
Well, I'll tell you two stories, and I think I've shared both these on the podcast before. So if I have, I do apologize. But, in this Vandy Sports 100 thing I'm doing, one of the things I try to do is go back and pick out a video of each of the players that we are honoring that's got some good highlights from their career. Now, sometimes I can't find a great one, and I just have to settle for some MLB scouting video of a guy hitting in a cage for 2 minutes if it's baseball, or maybe if it's an offensive lineman, there's nothing, and I have to run the team highlight film. But 90% of the time, I'm able to come up with a fairly relevant video. And I remember going back on some of these kids that played in the 2011 to 13 range, or even the 2008 bowl team in like that Auburn game. I know Myron Lewis was one that had some video from that game. And I'll be honest with you. What I saw then was so foreign compared to what I've seen the last 2 or 3 years, and especially last year. I'd almost forgotten that it happened like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the fans being engaged, having the majority in the stadium, being just lit and everything. I mean, it was a really good atmosphere. I know people say Vanderbilt, it's small and everything. Well, yeah, it was, but the fans in attendance were engaged and excited, and it got pretty loud for the size of that stadium, and it was fun. And no, was it electric like Auburn and Alabama? Of course not. But for what Vanderbilt fans are used to, being remotely relevant for a change is a big deal, and the fans were engaged and excited, and I watched that, I was like, holy cow, I did not remember it being like it was.
It was. I saw a picture of a game that I was at that you were at. What was it, Chris? What was the final score in the game? 41-18, I think it was.
The Tennessee
back in 2012.
game.
Yeah, back in 2012, where the guy standing right next to me he was about a 450-pound moron, decked out in orange and white checkerboard, and he had a shower curtain wrapped all the way around him with a gold pole. He was supposed to be a shower for some reason. He could have used one, but that's how he was decked out. And I remember a Vanderbilt fan punching him and making him fly about 3 rows down. Unfortunately, he landed on an older lady and messed her up a little bit. But the whole scene in the stadium, and I know you were in the press box, and Chris, that's why I got out of there to be able to come down there and remember what that was like. And yeah, you tend to forget that those things happened there. What I would say to you is the difference, before that and then where we're at now is I think that maybe the fan base, you tell me if I'm wrong, maybe the fan base before that thought, well, we don't have that because we just can't. We're too small, and a million different excuses as to why we couldn't have it. Whereas now the feeling more is we can't have that because Vanderbilt doesn't want it.
Oh, I think you've hit it.
I don't know that I ever really felt that way until now. And I'm hopeful that change is in the air, and I don't know if it is or not. We'll see. But to me, that's the difference. And I don't know if I'm right about that. That's just the way I perceive it.
Well, I'll go back to the Georgia game, right? It's the first of the year, and everybody knows Georgia's probably going to win that game. I think they're a 17-point favorite or whatever it was. But people are always excited for an opening game, right? I think
Sure.
that was the tell. Because in the past, Vanderbilt fans can always kind of talk themselves into getting up for anything. And maybe some of it was Georgia fans were paying crazy prices for tickets, and the fees for those have been jacked up. So maybe that was part of it too. But it just feels like that's the difference. That before it was kind of like, well, we got the deck stacked against us, if you're a fan thinking that, and all those things, the
Well,
little engine that could, or, David trying to beat Goliath. And now everybody knows it's the school. I mean, not that they could just go to bowl games every year and compete for titles. I mean, that might be tough, but now I think the secret's out. Everybody knows that so much of this is self-inflicted, and I think that it is a lot of it.
but what's weird? You know what's really weird? You mentioned that Georgia game. Do you remember the game that was played there in that stadium before that? The game before that at that stadium?
That's a good point. And maybe it was the tickets.
It's the Tennessee game. They got them bowl eligible.
Yeah,
man.
I know, and that was a good crowd. Maybe it was the ticket
and
prices.
Vanderbilt fans were going crazy as they watched Tennessee fans leave early. And then the very next game is that Georgia game, and you're like, what happened in between those two games?
Yeah, I don't know. I think. I mean, it's definitely had an effect, right?
Oh, well, yeah.
That may be the dumbest question I've ever asked, but
no, it hadn't had effect at all, Chris. Everything's the status quo. I think that here's what I'm hoping. I am hoping that with now that Zeppos is out and Diermeier's in, that there'll be a shift in athletic philosophy. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I have no idea. The dude got here yesterday. So I really have no idea. But if I'm going to put hope in something, I guess it has to be that. I don't know what else I'd put it in. I'm hopeful that, under his direction, that there's an emphasis. And by the way, there doesn't have to be a de-emphasis on academics because you emphasize athletics. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We posted a story the other day at my radio station about us carrying a couple of high school football teams games this year. They're new to our station, and put it on Facebook, and this one lady starts commenting, and she's just infuriated about how we're focusing on chasing a ball and not, and not academics. Well, who said it was one or the other? And last time I checked, Oxford, the great Oxford, they compete in athletics. I mean, you look at all the top-notch universities around the world. They have athletic programs. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I'm hoping that Diermeier and some of the others realize that. And there's a shift. I mean, we keep getting promises. We keep getting told we don't know what we're talking about and sit back and just wait. It's going to happen. Okay, well, we have sat back. We have waited. So now it's time to happen. You're not going to guilt a Vanderbilt fan into wanting better for the athletic side of the university as much as some people try to do that and make you feel stupid because you're actually asking for the bare minimum because you're not in the. I mean, if there's any that has the right to bitch and excuse my language, it's this one.
Have you been watching those pay-per-view lab experiments that they're showing at different colleges all over the country during this pandemic?
Well, I'll just kind of put it like this, Chris. If you were a gambling man and you were gambling on whether I had seen those, I think you'd put your money on no and you'd win. No, I have not. I've not even heard of that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't either. There's a point in there. There's a not so subtle point in there.
I get it now.
Yeah, I'm surprised it took you that long, but I'm from Memphis. Forgive me. Right. Back to Zeppos and Diermeier for a moment. Far be it from me to defend Nick Zeppos, right? But the further I get from it, I don't think he was anti-sports. I just think he had the spine of a jellyfish.
Well,
And I think it's Kirkland Hall. I've been saying that for a while. I think it's those people that control it, and it's the culture at the school. And the thing with Deermeyer, it's just going to be just how much guts or will does he have to stand up to it. I don't think the guy's anti-sports. I think he spent a lot of time with coaches and ADs and stuff like that. I mean, I've heard that in multiple places, but I'm like, okay, fine. If people want to get their hopes up with that, then go right ahead. But I'm just giving you the warning flag on that, because be careful, because you're probably going to get those dashed again.
well, I mean, and you may very well, but I mean, they have to have hope in something. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Oh,
Yeah.
and people want to have hope. I mean, that's fine. I've just seen this so many times. I'm thinking back to, I think I had a sense in the back of my head around last November that the thing with Turner wasn't going to work, because it was getting really quiet for whatever reason. Because, I mean, the summer and the fall, my texts, the phone calls I got were, Malcolm said this, and I talked to so-and-so who said this, and it was like everything was on the table, right? And if you were to go back and grab a copy of Blue Ribbon, the magazine that I write for, the basketball magazine, in the summer, I could find you the quote where I asked Jerry Stackhouse about Malcolm, and he said, Malcolm was hired to see what this place could be. Well, and all the rumors were about everything is on the table. I heard that more than once from more than one place, and we're just going to see what the options are. New football field, refurbished, new gym for basketball if we decide that's what's the most feasible option. I mean, everything was on the table, right? Everything was on
Yeah.
the table. And then I guess it was the fall he started getting sideways with Wente and those folks in Kirkland. And then all that chatter just got really quiet. And the phone calls I was making was like people weren't hearing anything. And I got a little closer to it and nobody would say anything. And I remember this is the day that I think I knew that it had gone horribly wrong. I had said something on our board because there just wasn't much to talk about. I said I had recently heard this about them looking at a new baseball field because they're going to move everything around. They're trying to work everything within a particular footprint. And that I found out later that was definitely true. That the approach was, okay, we've got this footprint of land that we can work with. And within that, let's look at the options. If we can't do stuff with football where we have it, we could move that over here. We could move baseball over here if we needed to, for whatever the reasons would have been. And again, Memorial Gym was on the table at one point. I don't know how serious that ever got, but the point was, let's take what we have in terms of the land and the money we're being allowed to raise and see if we can maximize that, we being the athletic department. So I think I caught some rumors and some discussion that had been a couple of weeks in the rearview mirror. And I just said on the board one day, look, here's some things I've heard are possible. This isn't me reporting. This is just me just kind of telling you what I'm hearing. I got a call that day from somebody at Vanderbilt. And this is nothing against the person that called me. This person was just doing a job that this person had been told to do. But that got quashed really quickly. Like, none of this is going to happen. I was like, really? So what is going to happen? And the answer I got was just the typical vague answer that you always get. We'll release that at the appropriate time. That kind of thing, right? That we always hear. And that's when I knew something had gone wrong. I think this was maybe right before Christmas or right after. But it went quickly from this is all on the table to we're not going to tell you anything. I think I've lost you.
You ain't lost me. I'm letting you go. Yeah. And then it leaves us there on the board like, okay, so here we are, we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, and then invariably nothing happens. So it's kind of why, and it's just an insight as to why we don't trust. We don't just automatically accept it when we hear this, that something is coming at the appropriate time, because I mean, we've just been conditioned to expect that that's not actually going to happen. So I think Vanderbilt has to understand that, these words are just empty to us now. We have to see something tangible. And even the thing that I think that bugs people the most is it's the stuff that we're talking about right now is the smallest of things, like the locker room. These are nice and they're significant, but those are the smaller end issues. And we can't even get that. And I hear you, COVID-19. I'm quite aware. Believe me, I've heard of it before. But even something as I don't want to call that minor. It's not minor, but that on that scale becomes an issue. What would make me ever believe that the major issues would ever get dealt with?
Yeah, they went from $800 million is what we need. Now let's kind of shoot for something like that. To they haven't spent a dime on much of anything. I mean, I think the only improvements they've made was stuff that Turner did and just took the bull by the horns.
Yeah, and I think that you got what sucks is, look, because as you mentioned, they've made a lot of major donors mad, and they're sitting back saying, I'm not doing anything until you do something, and then they're saying we can't do anything without your help. And so it's like we're waiting for somebody to make the first move, and nobody wants to do it.
Well, don't blame the donors, blame Vanderbilt, because that's inability to communicate a plan. Yeah. That's inability to communicate a plan that anybody thinks will move the needle. That's all that is.
Yeah. I mean, no, if that sounded like I was blaming the donors, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah. I mean, some may say differently, but that's what I've heard from a lot of them.
Okay.
I want to ask you another thing. This sort of ties into that, okay?
Ask away.
This week was the 1-year anniversary of the baseball championship. What are the best things that have happened with Vanderbilt sports in the last year since that happened?
In the last year, the best thing in Vanderbilt sports since winning the championship. Well, we didn't have a baseball season, so that doesn't count. You know what? I guess I would have to say, because the football season didn't exactly work out. I mean, because we were so hyped up. We had the big three coming back. We're going to do some stuff. Well, I guess what I would say would be, because the pickings are slim, I would say Keyshawn Vaughn being drafted in the third round is pretty significant. I would also say, and look, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything, but you're forcing the man to exactly stop. Say, I really appreciated the fight that Jerry Stackhouse's team played with down the stretch, last couple of games of the regular season. I thought they fought hard, man. I mean, clearly they were outgunned in some cases, but they beat a couple of teams who really needed to win some basketball games right at the end of the year. And they looked them right in the eye and sat there in the middle of the ring. And even though the numbers aren't there, they were swinging and playing hard for their coach. And I'm not going to confuse it with a really good basketball team, but I loved the effort down the stretch by Jerry Stackhouse and his basketball team. I did. I'm sorry, I just did.
I think there's really only three answers. I think if you want to go baseball, I mean, they didn't really accomplish anything, right? I guess you could say that you got a glimpse at a potentially really, really, really special group of freshman arms. So if you want to kind of, it didn't amount to anything, because I mean they're playing Evansville and teams like that. But you got a glimpse into a future that looks pretty good. So I think
Agreed.
that's one. The other, I would say, and this might have been the biggest moment of the year, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but it kind of, part of the significance of it was for what it meant, and that was that losing streak going away when they beat LSU in basketball.
Yeah, I mean, but that goes back to what I was just talking about.
I know, and that's the wall that we keep running. And in football, the Missouri game was pretty exciting. It was a pretty big moment at the time, but it's like, well, what did it really mean? So it's been a brutal year for that fan base, man. It has been excruciating.
Chris, I hear you, and yes, it has. But if you can't find any joy in the victories when you get them, then you're wasting your time. What you're doing.
That's not what I'm saying.
But you have to. You can't just gloss over those. Say, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't really mean anything. You have to take them when you can get them because it's you got to start somewhere. You have to, and things like wrecking that terrible streak, the worst in SEC history for men's basketball. They did it though, Chris. They did it. A ragtag bunch of guys that nobody gave any shot of. And what'd they do? What'd they score, Chris? What was that? 99 points, something like that. I think a team, and if I remember correctly, they scored. What was it, Chris? They either scored 40 points more than their average, or LSU surrendered 40 points more than what they were giving up per game. It was one of those two. Because it was fun to watch a team who nobody gave a shot in a game like that to do that. And then to go out and beat South Carolina. Who was the other team, Chris, that they beat down the stretch? Was it Ole Miss?
They beat Alabama on the road, and that's when Saban Lee went off. And that's the other part is the way Saban played was fun to watch. Look, I'm not invalidating because, look, I was there for the LSU game. That was genuinely fun to watch, and it was kind of neat to see kids get rid of that thing. And the Missouri game was fun in its own right because you had the Mo Hassan story and Missouri was ranked at the time. I'm not saying that because, yeah, those were moments to revel in if you're a fan. I'm just saying you just couldn't ignore the backdrop, and you can't remove that from anything we talk about. That's my point.
No, we're not removing, but we're inundated with the backdrop, dude. I mean, We know all about that. That's all we get all the time.
No, I know.
But that's my point. If you just can be, because we'll definitely accentuate all of that. But if that's the only place that we can live, I can't handle that. I can't live only there. It's not being an eternal optimist. It's not me having black and gold glasses. It's making sure that when we get, and I'm not satisfied, and you clearly know that, Chris, and I'm not saying that, but you have to be able to still get the joy out of it, even if it's brief. When we get those, you have to be able to, after watching games like Missouri and the LSU basketball game, you still have to walk. You have to be able to walk away from that saying, heck yeah, that was awesome. That was fun. I want to see that again. I want more of that. And we do. We want more of that. But you got to be able to appreciate that just as much as you got to be disgusted by the things you hate seeing.
Yeah. I guess my point was it's been a rough year for everybody. I mean, this has not been fun to cover. It's not been fun to podcast about, and it certainly had been fun for the fans and the players. And the one I just remember, I'm thinking back like how a year ago after the baseball season was over, it kind of felt like they were on the dawn of some big stuff. Because they had all this permission to do this and that and exploring this and that, and they just won a title, and nobody knew football was going to be as bad as it was, and basketball, at least you had a coaching change, and boy, you just look back at a year later and say there just wasn't much to be happy about.
Well, it wasn't, but I mean, this stuff works in cycles. Sometimes these cycles are too long, especially when they're bad. But this stuff works in cycles. Look, I mean, we've been through this before. I think you think about the Wake Forest game several years ago when you said to yourself, Chris, it can't get any worse than this. Vanderbilt football is doomed. We ended up having some pretty good times after that, didn't we?
But they had a level of commitment.
There you go. No buts. There's not a but. I mean, you have to be able to appreciate those things. You just do. I mean, you just do. There's no other way around it. I mean, yes, it's not. It's very difficult for us to ever envision being able to see that stabilized until there's a full commitment from this university. And if that's ever coming, I don't know. But man, I mean, it's those moments that allow us to dream about this, to hope for something better. I mean, we got to have those things. And I remember a time, look, I grew up I've been a Vanderbilt fan as long as you have. And I can remember for the first, from the time I was 10 to about the time I was 30, there was never anything ever to be, not at all. 3 wins was a decent season for that program. And there was never anything to ever get excited about, ever. They did nothing. Every now and then we'd have a good player, but we never had good teams. And we could never, ever win clutch games. And never was there ever a thought of beating Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Florida in the same season, much less beating any of them once in any season. And then beating them like that. I mean, the thought of going to 3 straight bowl games was an impossibility for us, yet it happened. I know philosophically you and I look at it differently, but I just have to be able to get as much pleasure out of those things as I do much disgust out of the things that bother me.
Okay, I think the reason you and I view it differently is I'm always taking okay, so what next? What does this mean, right?
Right.
And that's part of my job as a writer. I'm like, you look at it, and if it's something big like a championship, then you stay in that moment. But if it's otherwise pretty mundane, or if it's getting really bad and it's hit bottom, I'm always going, okay, what does this mean? What is coming next? That's just how I look at it. And the difference, and I cannot state this enough, okay? I'm sitting there at the Wake game in 2010, I guess it was, and there's not 200 people left in that stadium when it's over. They're just getting throttled by a bad Wake Forest team. And Robbie Caldwell's been fired early in the day, and they were bad that year. I mean, that 2010 team I've thought about this. I don't know who the team would be, but if I had to name the worst team that I have covered, it might be 2010 football, okay? So I've sat there in the bowels of sports hell many a time, and that was about as bad as it got. I will never forget that year. When Vanderbilt football is bad enough that it sits up and makes you take notice more than normal, that's how you know it's a bad year, right? But the difference then and the difference now is, I remember this clearly as day, is I'm sitting down there because the game had been over for a while, and they let you go onto the field with a few minutes left if you choose. And so I took the press elevator and went down to the field just to see what that was like as everybody came off the field. And it's cold, and it's dark, and it's cloudy, and everybody just wants to get out of there. I remember as clear as day, I'm sitting there under that goalpost on the close-in zone before the players are coming my way, and John Ingram looks me in the eye and says, "We're going to get this one right." Meaning the hire. And they did.
They did.
And nobody is saying things with that kind of conviction about anything over there now. And that's the difference.
Oh, well. So, let's get it right again. Let's do it. It's not about you and I. I guess that's probably might be the most maddening thing for you and for the fan bases, that it is. It's totally out of our hands. It's not like other schools. The other schools in this conference will have such an uprising that it makes a difference. And those universities, those state-ran universities, they care what their fan base thinks. They listen to their voice. And it's not about the numbers of voices, because our fan base could triple, and the things they say, I don't know that they would have that much of a significant difference, because unfortunately we got a place that even, I won't say mocks, but basically half the time barely listens to the significant donors. So if they're not going to listen to them, they're surely not listening to you and me. What are you going to, and what leverage do we have, Chris? Threaten to not show up? I mean, we're playing without leverage. That's tough.
Yeah. Now, yeah, they have not cared for years now about you unless you're one of the 30
Yeah. That's
multimillionaires and
right.
billionaires. I've heard that from people. That's now. I do think the new chancellor, is trying to hit that head on. They got
That's
rid
right.
of
And
the
the thing
head
is,
of
I don't care about them either. So
yeah.
that's fine with me.
Well, they got rid of the head of development, which I don't think was accidental. And you've seen that in the narratives of things that he said a few times, is things along those lines about, oh, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing, but it seems like they kind of know now that people don't feel valued, and there's that next level of donors that doesn't feel appreciated. And their alumni giving rate is garbage. So I think that's a thing that I hear from him that I'm going, okay, I think that they're aware of that, and they'll probably address that, which will only help them. I mean, it's just more money in their coffers. People like you and people listening that are just Joe football fans, I don't know that they'll ever care about those guys. But, new day, new chancellor in town, maybe he will prove me wrong.
Which is what I said 10 minutes ago. And I agree with that. I agree with, because I have to. I mean, I don't have anything else to hang my hopes on, I mean, it has to be something like that, because look, there's people with a bunch of commas in their bank account that they don't, that they don't mind offending or mind letting them know that, yeah, we appreciate it to an extent. So, I mean, I have nothing to offer them in that sense. They're not going to. It's going to have to be a fundamental philosophical shift at the top. And again, by the way, I wish I could find some way to convey to them that a fundamental shift does not mean abandoning your academics. It's not even remotely close. And then you sprinkle in the fact that we've got some craziness going on right now on campus once again. And it's here we are all over again, and so it sucks because we're just conditioned to expect the worst, and fan bases shouldn't have to go through this. Well, at least ours shouldn't.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into that story. I've sort of sat that one out for a bunch of reasons. The main one being, and you know me, I don't shy away from difficult topics and things like that, but the truth in some of those situations is sometimes awfully hard to get at. And B, I'm a one-man guy. I don't have an editor. I don't have a lawyer. And I'm just risking a whole lot more than I'm gaining by going there on a lot of that.
Yeah, and I get it. And what, it sucks for me because think about it like this. What I'd like to talk about today, and we can't even do it.
I'll say this. I don't know if you read the article. Adam Sparks did a really good job on that piece today, an outstanding job. I mean, I could just tell in reading that story how much research and detail he had done. I noticed there was not a quote from the AD, which I doubt was accidental. I'm sure he asked. I don't know. But I did find the part about they can't control who comes to pro day pretty comical.
Well, if they can, I don't know who could. I mean, I don't understand that statement, but that's a whole level of craziness unto itself. And I can't believe the situation and the way things are unfolding. It's shameful, absolutely shameful, and it's just a black. I hate it for all involved. And yeah, you can absolutely keep somebody away from a pro day. It's probably shouldn't be that difficult, to be honest with you, but that's the stance they've taken. What I would like to have focused on, the fact is, think about it like this. Derek Mason just got 2 commitments that won't move the needle on anybody, national radar. But here's what I would have told you. Take a look at those 2 commitments for a second. I'm not talking about who all offered, even though both of them had multiple Power 5 offers. I want you to think about something for a second, Chris. Both of those players, first of all, on the offensive line side of things, with the Gage Pittsford commitment. Gage is a big, tall, physical offensive linemen, the kind that you need to really establish your running game. Dylan, what is it? Dylan Betts-Pauley, I think it is. The running back from Hoover, which, I mean, I love getting Hoover players, good grief. I love getting players from big-time programs. It's at least an opportunity, heads up. Powerful, physical run. He's not going to leave anybody behind. He's not a 4-3 guy, but a big, bruising, running type. And then I look at the first offensive lineman that they signed. These are two big, mauling, physical offensive linemen and a powerful back. Remember, we keep talking about we're going to spread some things out under Fitch. And you can still have a powerful running game when you spread things out. You certainly can. But I find it very interesting how power-oriented they seem to be going on the offensive side of the ball with some of their players. You know, these first two linemen aren't a couple of guys who, you know, are taller that maybe they can get in and hit the weight program and fill out a physical frame. No, they're big and physical right now. You know, and it screams to me, we want to be physical at the line of scrimmage. We feel like we have been getting dominated at the point of attack, and we're kind of tired of that. You couple that with the defensive tackle commit, Tyrion Surgic. He's a bowling ball. I mean, and so to me, the message has clearly been so far with this class, especially around the trenches, we're tired of getting moved around. We're tired of getting moved off the football on both sides of the football, and we're going to do something about it by the people that we bring into this program.
My friend, I got a text. I'm going to take a phone call here in a minute that should be interesting. But with that, let's go to the mailbag because we haven't done that yet.
Oh, okay.
Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood who can take care of all your insurance needs. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or Facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Mr. Vandy says, what was your impression of the Peyton Daniels commitment?
Yeah, I like it. I haven't seen a whole lot of film on the guy, to be honest with you. Now, one thing that I would say is that, you know, and I think that the approach is going to shift going forward here. But one thing, it sounds to me like the Jerry Stackhouse first and foremost wanted to make sure that he had his backcourt stabilized. I mean, I feel like that's been the focus for the most part, recruiting effort-wise, early on in his career. And then, again, it's going to be time to start going after some of the more experienced post players out there. But I haven't seen a whole lot about Peyton, you know, in regards of film. I've seen some. The film that I have seen, he looked like a fast, quick, twitchy guard with a pretty nice shot, by the way. Some of the defensive play that I saw was less than stellar. You know, it wasn't like overly up in your grill, checking you, trying to get after and get the ball. I saw him get blown by a couple of times, but it's a highlight film, Chris. So, I mean, you know, I haven't had a chance to really sit down and take a look at him. But at least from an offensive standpoint, he looked pretty good.
Well, that summer ball, they don't exactly put a premium on defense.
I thought it was what I saw was not. I don't think it was a summer game. I thought it was a high school game between two regular team high school.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I thought it was. But
there's a few films out there on him. So yeah.
Yeah, I think what I saw was a high school game because, yeah, you're completely right. Look, I would never judge anything I saw in AAU and summer league basketball. I mean, that's not what they're there for. They're not there to play defense. So. And I certainly understand that. So, you know, I don't know. It's another solid piece to the backcourt. Now it's time to work on the front.
Yeah, they've got a guard situation that I think could reasonably be pretty good for them. Like I've said, they have lived in that 75 to 150 range in recruiting. And to see them getting back in there again, I think is a good step.
I totally agree with that, man. I mean, that's, you know, there is, believe me, you can win basketball games in that area. There's no question about it. And I think as long as they can stay there, 75 to 150 is not project players. It's not. They're good players who, maybe need a little bit more developing, and they're not quite on the level of the top 50 in the country. But you can certainly make your living with players like that, no doubt.
Ann Arbor says, Chris, are you hearing that we'll run more of a 4-3 defense next year? And if I answer yes, he asks you, do you expect a learning curve with this change, or are there enough 4-3 sets that this isn't a big deal? My answer to that is yes. That's what I believe to be true. I haven't asked. I don't know that they would have told me straight up anyway. I think they'd prefer to keep that a mystery, but the sense I get is the answer to that is yes. And so with that, where are you going to go with your answer?
Well, I just think that for me, there might be a learning curve. Now one thing I'll say is some of the cats that they're counting on, or at least we think they might be counting on as well, might be new to or new to this program. Period. So one way or the other, there'll be a little bit of a learning curve. But there's plenty of experience coming back, even if there's a shift from the 3-4 to the 4-3. I just think, and this is not a cop-out answer, I promise it's not. I just think that just based on sheer talent alone, there might be some, schematic learning curves, but I just think on the sheer improvement on talent alone, that this defensive line should be significantly better than it was, depth-wise and overall play-wise. Don't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've said this before. Just you look at the talent and where they're getting the kids, they have to be better on the defensive line. And they've got some kids like Tidd and Birchmeyer who played a lot of snaps and played at a decent level. If they're not a lot improved on the defensive line, I'll be really surprised.
Yeah, them two, Rutger and Davion Davis. Darion Davis, and I just. You throw in Derek Green and Malik Langham. I'll just say this on paper, and I get we don't play on paper. I think there's more reason to be excited about the defensive line unit than there's been in a long time. Dio in there, and there's just personnel-wise reason to be excited about it, which is weird because I'm not used to that at that position at this school. Never, almost never.
S.R. Kane says, based on nothing but gut feeling and anything you may have heard, who will start the most football games at quarterback in 2020?
Man. I think the logical answer is Ken Seals. As brief experience as it was good. I keep hearing people bring up his name. Now, I don't know of any substance to it, but I keep hearing people talk about Danny Clark.
Yeah, but Clark couldn't make it Kentucky, and that was a situation where they ended up with Lynn Bowden at quarterback last year. So I don't know.
Wasn't all that bad.
No, it wasn't. But you get my point. Bowden had been playing receiver before that, so
he had. But at the same time, the way he took that position. And I know a lot of it that was his feet too, but Lynn Bowden would have been by far the best quarterback on that team if he would have been Lynn Bowden on this team and for now on Danny. If his crime at least one of them right now is that he's not better. It's not a better quarterback than Lynn Bowden. That doesn't mean he can't be the quarterback of this team.
No, my point was it appears that there had been opportunity to compete for a job there because if you're in a point where you're playing a receiver at quarterback, then your depth there isn't probably that great.
Right. And hey, there is something to the change of address. Sometimes now you can't rely on that clearly, but it is a real thing. So
yeah,
it's always something to consider.
Sometimes change of address ends up being Cam Newton, and sometimes it's Tim Olmstead.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Olmstead. Now, was that That was Florida, right? Didn't we get somebody from Arizona?
Both were Florida. Yeah, and Richard Kovalchek was the next one I was thinking about.
Kovalchuk, that's
Well, a
it.
better one would be
Yeah,
Stephen
Richard Kovalchuk.
Rivers. So,
Oh, don't you go there with me. Yeah. Yeah, Richard Kovalchuk. I had forgotten about that. Wasn't he a decently recruited quarterback out of high school?
he was a 4-star when he went to Arizona. I liked that kid, too. I got to know him a little bit. He never amounted to anything at Vandy, but I always liked him.
Right. You know, I mean, look, here's one thing. When it comes to quarterbacks, I have learned maybe almost as much as any other position, especially when you sign multiple quarterbacks. I know the natural instinct is to fall in love with that high-rated prospect. But, man, that particular position, you just never know. Because I guarantee you, and you know this is true. Who was it that he came in with? Was it David Corral with Jay Cutler?
Yes.
Okay. If we were betting on Vegas odds, which one of those two would become the starting quarterback at Vanderbilt, how many people do you think would have picked Jay Cutler?
Well, it depends on when you ask, because if you had been there at an open practice they had when the freshmen got there and you watched those two standing side by side, there was no comparison.
Okay, how about this? On signing day, if I ask the same question and I preface by saying on signing day, you know, that's all I'm saying. Because look, other than a few reps between one or two of them, we haven't seen any of these guys. And I hadn't even mentioned Mike Wright.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, we're coming in with a freshman quarterback, or at least bare minimum a quarterback who's never been a starter on this team ever. You know, and I guess, well, has Danny Clark ever started, period?
I don't know.
I don't rightly know the answer to that. I don't think so, but I'm not going to speak in certainties in regards to that because I don't know that for sure.
Well, look, it's a situation where they had a kid in Seals who came to spring practice, looked better than I thought he was going to look, honestly, just because freshmen are usually going to struggle a little bit. He had the job sort of by default because Musa was the only other kid in camp and he was kind of hurt. But I don't say that to disparage the kid. I mean, he didn't do anything to quote unquote lose the job. And now you're headed into a fall with all kinds of questions and all sorts of new things. And you need something to hang your hat on in terms of what you know and where you think you can be confident in kid. I'm not saying that Ken Seals could lose that job, but I think if Seals plays at the level that he played at in the spring, it's going to take a really, really, really good fall camp from one of those new kids because you got a guy that's already, I hate to say the word entrenched after so few practices, but he's more entrenched than anybody, right? You got all kinds of changes. You got kids that are used to catching balls from him. Somebody's going to have to come in unless Ken plays at a lesser level than he did and somebody else really blows you away. I just think that job is going to be not impossible, but hard to wrestle away from him.
Well, it's sure. I tell you one thing, Chris, I don't look at this. I look at this quarterback race a little bit differently than when we had who all were they, Chris? Again, I'm going back in time. When David Wallace came in from CPA, was that the same time that Justin Perkey came in? I know there was a couple of quarterbacks that were freshmen all at the same time. Maybe it was Benji Walker. I don't remember who all that was.
Yeah, it was Perkey and Wallace, and I think who was the kid that had the game at Mississippi State and then never played again? Hy Lewis, I think, was on that team. Am I getting my years mixed up?
Hy Lewis from Colorado, right?
Yeah. Threw a couple of pick sixes and never saw the light of day again.
I think that's right. I think they initially started with Hy Lewis, if I remember correctly. You know, but I don't see it that way. this time. I see this group as a more talented group. To me, the quarterbacks that they've brought in, the four that they brought across the board are far more talented, potential-wise, than that group was.
Yeah, I could buy that, especially with Mike Wright. But let me throw one more thing at you that had not occurred to me till we're doing this. Okay, you've only got so many reps to go around in fall camp, right?
True, of course.
When you come in and you've already got a guy that took a lot of the snaps in spring and another guy behind him in Musa that took more, and you're wanting to see what Clark and Wright can both do, you got to give them time, right?
I think so.
Is it actually harder to take that job away from Ken Seals with more candidates than fewer? Because you might not get one person that can take enough snaps unless he just blows everybody out of the water right away to get the critical mass of good practice reps to take that job away. In other words, like if it's just Wright coming in and maybe not Clark too, let's say it's 2 or 3 quarterbacks and one of them's a walk-on, then all of a sudden those guys get more reps and more of a chance. But if you're splitting reps and trying to give everybody a chance, does that actually work more in Ken Seals' favor of keeping the job, if that makes sense?
Well, it could. I mean, of course, yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's certainly the way to look at it. And that's where you gotta trust your evaluators, your coaches, in the reps, and you talk to your receivers and your offensive linemen, and you hammer it. Look, they know they've got their work cut out for them because no matter what, they're getting a brand new starter, first time start. That's the case no matter what. So they already have that working against them. But secondly, you're right with the limited amount of reps and 4 guys who, and by the way, I think, look, if full disclosure, I have one in particular that I want to win the job, but at the end of the day, the main thing I care about is the best quarterback who has the ability to lead this team better than any of the 3. That's who I want to win the job ultimately. There is somebody that I'm pulling for. I will admit to that. But here's what I would say. Doesn't it seem to you, and I know he was hurt, but doesn't it seem to you that we're completely discounting Musa? That it would almost be bad if he won, but we don't know. I mean, he might be better than all 3 of the other ones. But it just seems to me like if I had to project a pecking order that I felt like the fan base felt about this quarterback position right now, I would think that it would go something along the lines of this: Seals at the top, Musa at the bottom, and a flip-flop between Clark and Wright, just because we just don't know and hadn't had a chance to see him right. Do you feel the same, or am I off on that?
Oh, I'm going to reserve judgment on Musa a little bit. I'll tell you what I remember seeing. And this was over 2 practices where Seals was getting more of the reps because Musa wasn't 100%, right? I think he had a brace on his right knee and was clearly not moving full speed. I thought that Musa had just a stronger arm in terms of raw talent. I thought that Seals was more accurate. But that's all I've got. Who knows what happens if he's healthier and maybe can plan a little better, got a little more confidence, a little further removed from that injury. I mean, I don't know what to expect from him. All I can tell you is what I saw. And what I saw was not a fair point of reference for him, I don't think, because, like I said, he wasn't 100%.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see, and none of those guys look inept to me, but we'll see what happens. My man, we're going to have to tie this off. I got to run.
Yeah, you need to shut your CB radio off there, whatever you're doing.
Down. That's Woodbine Racetrack. Thank you very much.
Oh.
I'm standing next to the box. He's got a 357 exacta box you need to be pulling for.
Well, I don't have to ask you what you're doing tonight, but before you go, tell people where they can find your show and where they can find your Twitter handle online, please.
My Twitter handle online is at Cheap Seats Bass, and you can find me at 101.5 FM in Jackson, Tennessee, Monday through Friday, and online at WNWS.com, my friend.
Be good and don't go broke.
I'm not betting. My friend is. I'm just watching him bet.
Sure you are.
Oh, well, let me tell you something. If I had put some cheese in the old Twin Spires account, believe me, you'd be the first person to know it.
Well, thank you. I'm honored.
You should be. Have a great night, my friend. Anchor down, fellas.
Be good. All right. He's Seabass of WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening. Should have one more episode coming your way Friday, and then, of course, more next week.